Hello, everyone. This is my presentation on starting a codependency psychoeducational group. My name is Kevin Cook, and this is for CN 520 group counseling, Dr. Pali Gill's class. And so first I want to start by defining what codependency is. And codependency is defined as a dysfunctional relationship dynamic where one person assumes the role of the giver, sacrificing their own needs and well-being for the sake of the other, referred to as the taker. And the challenge with this, that definition was a definition that was found in a online Psychology Today article. And the challenge with the term codependency as a disorder is that it's not actually a distinct personality disorder that's designated in the DSM. That you won't find codependency personality disorder. You'll find a person dependent, but you won't find a codependency personality disorder in the DSM. And as a result, codependency can actually have a variety of definitions with a scope of ranges. And so, because of this, it can be labeled very subjectively. And the one thing that I want to mention about labels is that I've noticed that a lot of people that are not therapists or psychiatrists or people that work in the profession, they will use terms and apply them to other people based on their own definition of meaning. For example, I know somebody recently that's labeled their husband as a narcissist. And their husband may very well be a narcissist, but this person also labels somebody else that I know as a narcissist. And so when things narcissism is found in the DSM, but things like codependency, when it's not found in places like the DSM, and there are liberties that can be taken, it's hard to pin down the specific definition of what something can be because the scope can vary from person to person. And so I just wanted to call that out. And so how do you identify if somebody is codependent, or how do you know if you're codependent? Well, a couple of my handouts that I've prepared along with this presentation are from the Codependence Anonymous, called CODA. And they have a handout that you should have. It's called Am I Codependent? And on the back of that handout, they have a lot of the traits and characteristics of codependency. And so I know you can't see that on the screen, but it is in the handout. And then another label, and this is what I personally would use, another resource or handout is what I would personally use if I started a codependency support group. Would be this codependency questionnaire that I found on positivepsychology.com. And this questionnaire is more of like a self-survey or evaluation to determine if you have codependent traits. And then at the end of it, there's a score, and that will tell you the likelihood of whether you're codependent or not, or how codependent you are, or how codependent you're not. And so when we're talking about the difference between dependence and codependence, what we're really talking about is what is healthy dependence versus unhealthy dependence? What is healthy dependence and what is codependence or unhealthy dependence? Well, dependence is when two people rely on each other for support and love, and they both find value in the relationship. The codependent person, they feel worthless unless they are needed by someone, and if they're making drastic sacrifices for someone, also referred to as the enabler. And the enabler actually may get satisfaction from having every need met by the other person. And so that's unhealthy codependence. In dependence, both parties prioritize their relationship but can find joy outside of their own relationship. They don't need their relationship to fulfill them in its entirety, but they can actually find also fulfillment in outside interest, in other friends, and in hobbies. The codependent person has no personal identity, and they have no interest in or values outside of their codependent relationship. In codependence, Both people can express their emotions and needs and find ways to make the relationship beneficial for both of them. In codependence, one person feels their desires and needs are unimportant and will not express them because they put the needs of the other person above their own. They may have a real hard time recognizing their own feelings and needs at all because they're so used to focusing their needs on the other person. So the need and benefit of a psychoeducational dependency group. So one of the most important parts about the need for this group is that it provides education to those who wrestle with codependence. And education is important because education will help individuals have and grow a self-awareness about their codependence. And as they grow in self-awareness about their codependence, the hope is that they will find an empowerment as an individual, and that empowerment will help them to live healthy, empowered lives that helps them to live in independent and successful ways. And this really helps an individual break free from their unhealthy codependent behaviors. So when starting a codependent support group, you'll have to think about things like who is your target demographic. So I've just named a handful of these. There is women-specific codependent groups, and there can be men-specific codependent groups. And I think that there's probably some generalizations or maybe even stereotypes that women are more codependent than men. And unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot of research done on codependency. But I can say from personal experience is that I've seen both codependency in women and codependency in men. Myself, of which were one of those in my early 20s. I remember being very, very dependent on relationships. I went from one serious relationship to the next, and I didn't like the spaces in between because I really wrestled with being single. And so just wanted to call that out. Other demographics are single parents. Single parents, parenting in general, we tend to live through our children, and sometimes our identity can get lost in our children. Our identity can become who our children are. So if you're a single parent or even a married or a divorced parent, those are three different demographics that can have their own specific groups. Also, too, one really important one is people with family members that struggle with substance abuse or addiction. It is known that in some of the literature that's out there that there can often be a trait of codependency in relationships where one person wrestles with substance abuse or addiction. And so the other person can feel like the rescuer and almost need that. And they can also too become the enabler to where they almost need that person to be in a certain state because in some weird upside down way, they get their value from being able to care for and rescue this person over and over. As well as, victims of domestic violence. Unfortunately, this is something where sometimes the victims believe the prison that they're in, and they sadly can become codependent on their abuser. And so these are just some types of specific groups that can be formed. Also, too, in terms of how you reach your target demographic, everybody knows social media is really powerful to where they collect data and analytics on every specific characteristic or trait of a person that will allow someone in marketing to find their exact target demographic. And so that's one powerful way to reach your audience. Also, too, there are discussion boards and groups out there that are places where your target demographic can be found. And then obviously more traditional ways, which social media is becoming the tradition, but before social media, there's good old-fashioned networking with healthcare, either individuals or groups, other private practices. But another really powerful place to reach your target demographic are recovery-based communities, because these are spaces also too that are known to have, people that also have codependence there. So, okay, so codependency group goals. So the primary goal of a codependency group, especially a psychoeducational group, is education. And so you want to educate your members around codependency. And by educating them with codependency, you can also enable them to develop skills of managing traits around codependency. Things like low self-esteem and like uncertainty and self-doubt. You can really build tools and skills. You can give them skills that will help manage these traits of codependency. But also too, in that group setting, you are able to provide emotional support. That's another significant goal for a group. Not to mention things like personal growth and, most importantly, community. There's something very powerful about people with codependency coming around to support one another, to know that they're not alone. And so as a group leader, you want to have an awareness about some things. First and foremost, you want to have an awareness about stigma that's associated with labels and disorders. You want to cultivate a safe space in a group culture. And part of doing this is reinforcing things like informed consent and confidentiality. You want to let people know that it's a safe space for them to share what their experiences have been and what they wrestle with. And then also too, as a group leader, you want to make sure that you're paying really close attention to group interactions and behaviors, and just like what you're cultivating in the group, who's oversharing, who's not sharing, and you want to be able to manage these things accordingly. And so things that you can anticipate, challenges, again, the stigma, unbalanced group dynamics, I just talked about that. And then also too, again, relationship dynamics and conflict within the group. And so some therapeutic techniques and approaches to employ in a group like codependency is cognitive behavioral techniques. This will help change the way that people think and address things like insecurities, anxiety, and even things that people may feel. Another thing is mindfulness. Mindfulness is what addresses things like anxiety and managing major life change. Change is hard for people. So mindfulness is a way to help them like adapt to change in their life. Role playing, it will really empower people and help them to confront fears in a safe way. And then I think an emotionally focused approach is important for building empathy in the group as well. And so finally, like ethical responsibilities. What are our ethical responsibilities? Well, informed consent, again, in maintaining confidentiality, that's huge. A leadership self-awareness of our own perspectives and experiences. What are our biases? And awareness of group dynamics through the different stages of the group meetings. So in managing all of these challenging behaviors. These are all important ethical responsibilities that, as group leaders, that we need to be aware of. And then managing group cohesiveness. So in building your group culture, some thoughts and ideas is like starting with icebreaker exercises to get to know one another. You want to employ empathy to build understanding and trust. You really want them to grow in their trust for you. Reflection exercises will help gauge what's effective. So if you do some sort of reflection exercises at the midpoint, and definitely at the end, I'll talk about that in a second, but the midpoint will help you gauge what's effective and what's not effective, including what's helpful and what's not helpful for the group. And then reflection exercises, again, at the end will help when you bring the group to closure, as that's typically a sad point for many in the group, because you've, over the course of like 12 weeks or however many weeks you meet, real bonds are built. So when that comes to a close, some people wrestle with that and have a hard time with closure. And so that is my presentation. Thank you for listening, and take care.